Hello, I am Sana and welcome to today's lecture. Today I will be talking about George Vaillant's mental health and adult development, and this lecture will cover 5 major objectives. The first objective is who was George Vaillant. The second one is concept of positive mental health. The third one is Vaillant's theory of adult development, and the last objective is successful aging. Before we begin, let us talk about who was George Vaillant. A graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Medical School, Dr. Vaillant is professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School and the Department of Psychiatry, Brigham and Women's Hospital. His research interests are quite vast and encompass topics such as psychological adaptation, aging, alcoholism, defense mechanism, heroin dependency, mental health, opioid use disorder, personality disorders, schizophrenia, and spirituality. He has spent the last 35 years as director of the study of adult development at the Harvard University Health Service. The study has prospectively charted the lives of 824 men and women for over 60 years. Dr. Vaillant did his residency at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center and completed his psychoanalytic training at the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute. He has been a fellow at the Center for the Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences, is a fellow of American College of Psychiatrists, and has been an invited speaker and consultant for seminars and workshops throughout the world. A major focus of his work in the past has been to develop ways of studying defense mechanisms empirically. More recently, he has been interested in successful aging. Let us now talk about another objective, which is the concept of positive mental health. As Erik Erikson rightly said, I quote, "We cannot even really know what causes neurotic suffering until we have an idea of what causes real health. This we have only begun to investigate. Psychology is obsessed on the construct of mental illness. After all, mental illness is a condition whose boundaries can be rather accurately identified. In contrast, it appears that mental health is more a matter of moral judgment than of science. For instance, while certain signs of mental illness can be present, mental wellness is more than just the absence of symptoms. Although its definition is difficult, it is too significant to be disregarded." George Vaillant emphasized that when defining mental health, one must take into account a number of different elements. First, when defining mental health, cultural differences must be taken into account. Second, it's crucial to remember that being average isn't always healthy. In defining mental health, Vaillant describes 7 concepts of positive mental health: effective functioning, strengths of character, maturity, positive emotional balance, socio-emotional intelligence, life satisfaction, and resilience. Let us discuss them one by one. The first one is effective functioning. Mental health is above normal. Influential works on mental health started to appear after World War II. Despite the fact that all research focused on normal populations, they nonetheless emphasized mental health that was above average rather than pathological. Then, in 1958, a psychiatric paradigm shift acknowledging the presence of mental health resulted from Mary Yehuda's report to the American Joint Commission on Mental Illness and Health. According to her, mental health includes the capacity to love, work, and play, as well as autonomy, investment in life, efficient problem solving. At the time she presented her criteria, there was, however, still no proof that her conceivable definitions went beyond being merely theoretical. The Liborski-led Menninger psychotherapy project was a significant investigation into mental health. He developed the health sickness rating, which uses behavior rather than traditional written and pencil assessments, and has a scale from 0 to 100. A score of 80 or above reflected positive mental health. A score of 95 to 100 reflected an ideal state of complete integration, of resilience in the face of stress, of happiness and social effectiveness. Liborski's scale was modified by two of the architects of DSM-3. The second concept is mental health as the presence of multiple human strengths. This second model, which has served as the foundation for the positive psychology movement, resulted from the fact that psychologists have approached mental health in a manner that is somewhat distinct from psychiatry. While in medicine, you either have an illness or you do not, psychologists, like physiologists, focus on continua rather than categories. Psychologists' goal of fostering positive mental health in an educational model is distinct from the medical goal of using medication to remove pathology. Coming to the third, which is mental health as maturity. The human brain continues to evolve in adulthood, in contrast to other body organs that have evolved to remain the same or deteriorate after puberty. Therefore, adult mental health reflects to some extent a continuing process of maturational unfolding and progressive brain myelinization in 1960s. Prospective studies indicate that individuals exhibit greater emotional modulation and lower levels of depression in the seventh decade of their life than they did at the age of 30. Erikson proposed that maturity results in a widening social radius as adult development evolves through life experience. In Erikson's model, mastery of four sequential tasks of identity, intimacy, generativity, and integrity leads to adult maturity over time. Based on empirical data from Harvard's investigation of adult development, Vaillant has added two additional tasks: career consolidation prior to generativity and keeper of the meaning prior to integrity. Surprisingly, these skills seem to be fairly independent of gender, social class, education, and probably culture. Although the maturity of the person's life stage is strongly correlated with mental health, the age at which a task is mastered varies greatly. Coming to the fourth, which is mental health as positive emotions. In the writings of 19th century psychiatrists, mental health was thought to be related to morality and religious observance, who discussed concepts like moral insanity and good character. During the 20th century, the rise of cultural anthropology, psychoanalysis, behaviorism, molecular biology, and secularism as a whole led psychiatrists to question the connection between health and morality. However, psychiatry has been forced to take positive emotions seriously due to recent advances in biological understanding. Positive emotions, which were previously confined to popular music, pastoral counseling, and religion, have become scientifically plausible in the past 10 years. Medical students were mostly taught about hypothalamic emotions like lust, hunger, fear, and rage 50 years ago. Empathy, compassion, and parental love, which are examples of pro-social emotions, were thought to be learned behaviors. As a result, they were placed in the neocortex and taught in schools of education rather than medicine. Then, during the 1960s, P. MacLean, H. Harlow, and J. Bowlby moved consideration regarding love as attachment and not as sexual drive, consequently making the reason for neuroscience to give substance to the sayings of Yehuda. Maslow, and even of St. Paul, with his theological virtues of faith, compassion, hope, and love. P. MacLean, a neurobiologist, pointed out that limbic structures control our mammalian capacity to remember, that is cognition, to play, that is joy, cry out when we are separated, that is faith or trust, and care for ourselves, that is love. However, studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging have only been conducted in the last 2 decades to investigate the neurobiology of positive emotions. A number of studies locate pleasurable human experiences in limbic regions. 8 positive feelings, love, hope, joy, forgiveness, compassion, faith, awe, and gratitude contain the significant good and moral emotions described in this model. Among these 8 chosen positive emotions, all involve human connection, which is very important. In addition, there are 5 additional positive present-oriented emotions, which are excitement, interest, contentment, humor, and a sense of mastery. Moving to the 5th concept, which is mental health as social emotional intelligence. In the same way that a high IQ indicates above average intellectual aptitude, high socio-emotional intelligence indicates above average mental health. Positive mental health is based on this kind of emotional intelligence. The criteria that can be used to define social and emotional intelligence is the accurate self-awareness and self-monitoring of emotions, modifying our feelings so that they can be expressed appropriately, exact acknowledgement of and reaction to emotion in others, ability to negotiate with others in close relationships, ability to direct emotions in the direction of a desired objective. Our knowledge of connection between socio-emotional intelligence and good mental health has been put into practice over the past 25 years. The first step is that our comprehension of how the limbic system and prefrontal cortex integration has improved because of fMRI and neurophysiological research. Our slow but steady progress in conceptualizing and even measuring emotional intelligence is the second step forward. Measures of emotional intelligence have been rapidly evolving over the past 10 years. The second step forward has been our slow but steady progress in the conceptualization and even the measuring of emotional intelligence. Over the last decade, measures of emotional intelligence have been evolving rapidly. There are now many exercises in handling relationships that help couples, business executives, and diplomats become more skilled at conflict resolution and negotiation. In the past decades, there has also been an increasing effort to teach school children core emotional and social competencies, sometimes called emotional literacy. Let us now talk about the 6th concept, which is mental health as subjective well-being. Long before philosophers pondered criteria for mental health, they considered criteria for happiness and the good life. However, if through the centuries philosophers have sometimes regarded happiness as the highest good, psychologists and psychiatrists have tended to suspect it. Happiness that comes from joy or unselfish love, that is agape, or from self-control and self-efficacy, or from play and flow reflects health. Happiness that comes from spiritual discipline and concentration, or from mature humor, or from being relieved of narcissistic focus on shame, resentments, and the poor me's is a blessing. The rest of the world has always been skeptical of American concern with happiness. Only in the last decades have investigators like M. Seligman and E. Dinier pointed out that a primary function of subjective well-being is that it facilitates self-care, thus becoming an antidote to learned helplessness. Again, controlling for income, education, weight, smoking, drinking, and disease, people high in subjective well-being live significantly longer. The last concept is mental health as resilience. There are 3 broad classes of coping mechanisms that humans use to overcome stressful situations. The first 2 are conscious, which is seeking social support and cognitive strategies that we intentionally employ to master stress. The third mode of coping is involuntary mechanisms, which distort our perception of internal and external reality in order to reduce subjective distress and anxiety and depression. These involuntary mental mechanisms are labeled as the defenses. The most pathological category of coping mechanisms include denial and distortion of external reality. More common to everyday life are the immature and maladaptive defenses found in adolescents and in adults with personality disorders like projection, passive aggression, acting out, and schizoid fantasy. The third class of defenses often associated with anxiety disorders and with the psychopathology of everyday life includes repression, intellectualization, reaction formation, and displacement. The fourth class of involuntary coping mechanism characterize mental health. Mature defenses still distort and alter feelings, conscience, relationships, and reality, but they achieve these alterations gracefully and flexibly. Doing as one would be done by altruism, keeping one's stiff upper lip, that is suppression, keeping future pain in awareness, that is anticipation, the ability not to take oneself too seriously, that is humor, and turning lemons into lemonade, that is sublimation, are the very stuff from which positive mental health is made. But alas, these behaviors cannot be achieved by a simple act of conscious will. Thus, the beholder regards such adaptive defenses as virtues, just as the beholder may regard the prejudice of projection and the tantrums of acting out as sins. Ultimately, like other facets of mental health, the reliable identification of healthy but involuntary coping mechanism requires longitudinal study. Studies from both Berkeley's Institute of Human Development and Harvard's Study of Adult Development have illustrated the importance of the mature defenses to mental health. Let us now talk about one more major objective of today's lecture, which is George Vaillant's theory of adult development. Vaillant's book, Aging Well, was published in 2002, where he describes 6 stages of adult development. During these stages, individuals achieve social and emotional growth defined by factors like lifestyle and well-being. His studies were conducted over an extended period of 80 years, giving a more detailed insight into the aging process. He attempts to synthesize findings of the Harvard longitudinal study of adult development and aging, the Terman longitudinal study of adult development and aging of women, and the Harvard longitudinal study of educationally disadvantaged inner STEAM males. His frame of reference is fundamentally Erikson's model. Erikson conceptualized the evolution of emotional and social intelligence over time, which relates mental health with maturity. His conceptualization of such development as a widening social radius is like expanding ripples in a pond. Over time, the adult social radius expands through the mastery of 4 tasks: identity versus identity, fusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. To this model, Vaillant adds 2 additional stages on the basis of empirical data from Harvard's study of adult development, that is, career consolidation and keeper of the meaning, and then demonstrated their sequential nature. Mastery of such tasks appears relatively independent of education, gender, social class, and arguably culture. In such a model, the social radius of each adult development task fits inside the next. The 6 stages of adult development outlined in Vaillant's theory include the following. First stage is developing an identity. Individuals establish their independence and begin to define themselves as a separate entity from their family by defining one's values and beliefs. First, the adolescent must evolve an identity that allows him or her to become separate from the parents, for mental health and adult development cannot evolve through a false self. The task of identity requires mastering the last task of childhood, sustained separation from social, residential, economic, and ideological dependence on one's family of origin. Such separation derives as much from the identification and internalization of important adolescents, friends, and mentors as it does from simple biological maturation. For example, our accents become relatively fixed by the age of 16 and reflect those of our adolescent peer group rather than the accents of our parents. The second stage is development of intimacy. Individuals develop intimate relationships where they make lifelong commitments to another person and define themselves within their relationship. Developing intimacy permits them to become reciprocally and not narcissistically involved with a partner. To many young adults, to live with one another person in an interdependent, reciprocal, committed and contented fashion for years and years may seem neither desirable nor possible. Once achieved, however, the capacity for intimacy may seem as effortless and desirable as riding a bicycle. Sometimes a relationship is with a person of the same gender, sometimes it is completely asexual, and sometimes as in religious orders. The interdependence is with a community. In different cultures and epochs, mastery of intimacy has taken very different guises, but mating for life and marriage-type love are tasks built into the developmental repertoires of many warm-blooded species, including our own. The third stage is career consolidation. Individual's identity is defined through the social context of one's career. Career consolidation is a task that is usually mastered together with or that follows the mastery of intimacy. Mastery of this task permits adults to find a career as valuable as they once found play. On a desert island, one can have a hobby but not a career, for careers involve being of value to other people. There are 4 crucial developmental criteria that transform a job or hobby into a career, which are contentment, compensation, competence, and commitment. The 4th stage is generativity. Individuals take on mentorship roles within the community and become more altruistic. Mastery of the 4th task, that is generativity, involves the demonstration of a clear capacity to unselfishly care for and guide the next generation. Existing research reveals that sometimes between ages 35 and 55, our need for achievement declines and our need for community and affiliation increases. Depending on the opportunities that the society makes available, generativity can mean serving as a consultant, guide, mentor, or coach to young adults in the larger society. Generativity reflects the capacity to give self finally completed through mastery of the first 3 tasks of adult development away. Its mastery is strongly correlated with subsequent mental health in old age. For in old age there are inevitable losses, and these may overwhelm us if we have not continued to grow beyond our immediate family. The 5th stage is becoming keeper of the meaning. Individuals perceive their knowledge and expertise contributing to society and become more aware of a broader social scope in passing down knowledge and traditions. The penultimate life task is to become a keeper of the meaning. Like grandparenthood, this task involves passing on the traditions of the past to the future. Generativity and its virtues, care, require taking care of one person rather than another. Keeper of the meaning and its virtues of wisdom and justice are less selective, for justice, unlike care, means not taking sides. The focus of a keeper of the meaning is with conservation and preservation of collective products of mankind, the culture in which one lives and its institutions, rather than with just the development of its children. Clearly, caretakers and grandparents are not mentally healthier than caregivers and parents. The distinction is only that grandparents are usually better at the tasks of keeper of the meaning than are 30 years old. The 6th and the final stage is achieving integrity. Individuals find acceptance in their existence and their place in the universe. Finally, in old age, it is common to feel that some life exists after death and that one is part of something greater than one's community. Thus, the last life task is integrity and the task of achieving some sense of peace and unity with respect to one's own life. One's social radius may expand to embrace the whole world. Erickson described integrity as an experience that conveys some world, order, and spiritual sense. It is the acceptance of one's one and only life cycle and of the people who have become significant to it as something that had to be and that, by necessity, permitted of no substitutions. Of course, healthy adult development does not follow rigid rules, nor are butterflies healthier than caterpillars. Some individuals often, because of great stress, tackle developmental tasks out of order or all at once. For instance, Beethoven enjoyed a brilliant committed career but never enjoyed intimacy. Vaillant's model of adult development does not claim to be predictive but descriptive of successful aging. Let us talk about the last objective of today's lecture, which is about successful aging. Henry Amiel in 1874 wrote, I quote, "To know how to grow old is the master art of wisdom and one of the most difficult chapters in the great art of living." As most of the people today tend to live into their 80s, for this reason George E. Vaillant and his team examined 3 groups of men and women aged 60 to 80 years and published their findings in his book Aging Well. The data were analyzed and recorded. The fact that this study's data was compiled over several years makes it groundbreaking. The data gathered gives valuable insight into what Vaillant calls successful aging. A stable marriage, a mature adaptive style, no smoking, low alcohol use, regular exercise, and maintenance of normal weight were all strong predictors of those who would be in the happy at age 80. At age 50, 106 of men had 5 or 6 of these advantages, and by age 80, half of this group was considered to be happy and in good health. In terms of life consequences, just 8 people fell into the sad sick category. To age well physically, the single most important choice was to avoid heavy smoking before age 50 or to quit at a young age. However, alcohol abuse has especially harmful impact on a person that not only damages the body but also inhibits the process of maturation. Alcohol is a cause rather than a result of life's problem. The study found that very few unhappy marriages resulted in alcoholism, but that the marriage often ended when the man had an alcohol issue. The quality and the strength of relationships such as marriage, family, friends, and community involvements are referred to as social supports, and research has shown that these relationships and physical health are frequently etiologically distinct. The correlation between mental and physical health is similar to that between height and weight, according to Vaillant. The factors that cause height and the things that cause weight are immensely similar and at the same time enormously different. While the last 20 years of scientific studies have increased his appreciation for the significance of heredity, witnessing adults evolve over lifetime has decreased it. With the passage of time, successful aging is remarkably free of genetic factors. For example, good genes do not account well for the generally superior health of the Harvard sample, whose mortality by age 65 was half that expected of white males in their birth cohort. In fact, their death rate was only 2/3 that of their Harvard College cohorts. These men are affluent. At age 47, their average income was $90,000 in 1989, but Vaillant states that being able to afford better doctors, hospitals, and healthcare is unrelated to their health or longevity. It's not economic at all, he asserts. People who go to hospitals are sicker than people who don't. Having better doctors and hospitals is a bit like locking the barn after the horse is out. The trick is not going to hospitals in the first place. A more important factor may be higher education, which seems to improve self-care in ways not well understood. The inner city men, for example, who were far less educated than the Grant study sample, were also drastically more obese, and their physical health at the age of 65 resembled that of the Grant study men at 75. Vaillant emphasized the importance of relationships as a single strongest predictor of successful aging. Socially isolated men died at younger ages. A mature coping style strengthens relationships because being able to handle emotional issues gracefully removes barriers between people. Advancing age impairs some motor skills, but maturation can make people sharper at emotional tasks. This brings us to the end of the topic. Thanks for watching.